So question 19, solve the equation in the complex number system. So since we're talking about the complex number system, we can have imaginary numbers. So in other words, we may have answers that look like this, A plus BI. So remember, a complex number can be a real number. It can be a real number combined with an imaginary number, or it can just be an imaginary number. So the A could be a 0, which means all would be there would be the imaginary part, or B could be 0, which just leaves me a real number part. So complex number is kind of a marriage between the real number system and the imaginary number system. So it's kind of, at this point, it's it has all of our numbers in it that we're going to be involving, real as well as imaginary. Most of the material we deal with this class will deal with a real number system, but every once in a while we'll come across units where they're also going to be looking at the complex number system. So again, just by looking at it, I don't see the factors of a 34 that are going to give me this -6. So a hint is, if it says a complex number system, the chances are it's not going to be factorable. We're going to be using a quadratic formula. So notice that A is going to equal 1, B is going to equal -6, and C is going to equal this 34. So when I use my formula, we have to take the opposite of a -6, which is going to be a 6, plus or minus the square root of. Now, since B is negative, we need to use parentheses inside the radical. So -6 squared, because again, if we just put -6 squared like this in the calculator, notice it gives me a -36. This actually means the opposite of 6 squared. So it's only a square in the 6, which is 36, and it's taking the opposite 36 and making it a -36. Because we know that a negative times a negative is actually a positive. So we have to put it in the calculator as, in parentheses, squared. Notice how it does give them a positive 36. So that's an important piece to pay attention to if you're using technology. So we have minus 10, there's 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is this 34. And this is going to be all over 2 times 1, which would just be 2. So again, the key is simplifying what's inside the radical. So again, I have this in parentheses, it's -6 squared minus 10, 4 times 1 times 34. Hit enter, and it gives me a -100. So x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of a -100 divided by 2. So note that square -100 is actually going to be an imaginary number. Because remember, if there's a negative inside the radical, that tells me that the imaginary unit is going to come out. And the square root of 100 is 10. So this is going to turn into 6 plus or minus 10i over 2. So then we want to separate this as 2 fractions, 6 over 2 plus or minus 10i over 2. So 6 divided by 2 would be 3. We have this plus or minus, and then 2 does go into 10, 5, so 5i would be that. So 3 plus or minus 5i would be the answer. So you can put that in the set of parentheses, or you can separate it as 2 different values, 3 plus 5i, comma, 3 minus 5i. So that would be your 2 solutions there for question 19. And notice that neither one of those is actually a real value. These are actually what we call complex numbers. To be a real value, the imaginary unit cannot be present.